Other Voices SCV with Carole Lutness presents Bridging the Gap. Been able to look at last times?
I did, yeah.
Any reflections or suggestions or any ideas?
I really like the topics we're going to be discussing today. So
Which are, if you could remind us, please.
I think we're discussing a bit of climate change, unless I
just wrote an article about that.
Climate change?
Actually, it was about electric vehicles.
And
when I went through the data, I was totally surprised. It blew me away.
And tell us about it.
That if the United States had a vehicle on as an electric vehicle by 2030, the world would still have 500,000 more gas-powered vehicles than they have today.
Zoom with Carole and Dave.
You know, they're actually, you sent out a great agenda, and the second point on it was power issues in the Santa Clarita Valley.
Yes.
And we had, last week, we had a League of Women Voters, a conference with the mayor where Bill Miranda spoke. And I had asked a question that basically was, if we go to districts instead of at-large council seats, how will that change the city? And unfortunately, when they read the question to Bill, they changed if to when. And so the question that was posed to Bill was, when the city moves to council districts rather than at-large members, how will that change the city? And Bill just went nuts. He said, this question, he went on and on and on about why at-large council seats were better, and that he didn't see the city moving to districts in the near future. And I thought that what had happened was that the city council was going to hold some sort of hearing on it, on going to districts, and then got postponed because of COVID.
Yes.
And I really don't know. I was surprised to hear what Bill had to say, and I was wondering if Al had any response to that, because I know Al.
Could we stop this? I think this is a really good topic, and I'd like to have it filmed. Is that possible? Jim, can you repeat this when we get back on?
He's recording. He's recording right now.
Oh, well, I didn't know that, Dave. You didn't tell me you were recording.
Oh, we've been recording our entire fiasco. It was this is just.
Oh, I don't want this. I want to start with the music and the picture of the oak and me doing a little blurb and then bringing you guys in. I'd like to have some continuity with this. Okay, Dave, can we start again?
We are. No, Carole, there's actually, we're doing an Amazon Prime feature too. It's called Bridging the Gap Bloopers, episode 3. To begin with first. So this is how we make money on the side.
Good idea. Yeah. We'll be influencers.
Very good, Andrew.
Make us our checks after.
I love it. This is Bridging the Gap 3. We have been speaking throughout these little episodes to people in Santa Clarita with various political, social, and racial outlooks, religious outlooks, because what we want to try to do is find a way that we find common ground so that we can solve problems together. So there's a feeling of equity and fairness and balance, and that issues get discussed, and we can come up with some harmony in the community. So, hi guys. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. So we have our first 2 episodes up on Facebook, and tonight we're going to be talking about several issues. What are some of the issues that you all might want to talk about tonight? Raise your hand so that I can, we can unmute you. Yes, Al, unmute your, can you yeah, there.
Well, I would really like to talk about ways of bringing us all together. So some of the things I've noticed in the past is we talk about things that happened in the past and maybe expand on them and so forth. But I think the most important thing we could do is discuss how we can all get together and become and join together. What do we have to do to make that happen?
Okay, that's a great topic. Peg?
Yeah, I agree. We went around and talked quite a bit about this last meeting, and we came to consensus on a number of things. But the most important, I think, was that we need to have conversations that allow us to understand one another, respect each other's opinions, and most importantly, get to know each other's life experiences. How are our life experiences differing from one another? Because that's a very important part of getting to know other people. We know we have loads and loads of similarities, but when people are able to tell where they're coming from and where they've been, I think that's the best way we're going to be able to reach that goal.
Okay. And anyone else have ideas about this evening's discussion? Drew?
Oh, I was patting a fly away, but
Oh, okay. Sebastian. Hi, honey.
I was just gonna say, like, on top of that, everyone has a connection to community in Santa Clarita in general, and I think in bridging this divide and building a community in the future, just that kind of like how we can not only similarities, but also kind of like address the fact that we all have this passion for our city too, and like this community in general.
I think that's the passion that this group has for the community and for being a good citizen. I think that's the hallmark of everyone. And we've all kind of made our mark in various ways, made contributions to the community. We're not I heard a man who had written a book about patriotism, and he divided patriotism into three categories. He called the first one the pageantry patriots. The flags and the support our troops marches, all of that sort of pageantry, which is important. And then the other one was the passive pageantry patriotism, which was more just, I believe in our government and I'm loyal to the country. I don't do too much. And the third was the principled patriotism, the people who try to do something in their lives to make a contribution to the greater good. And I think that the group, not everybody's here tonight, but the group that we've assembled are great representatives of that kind of patriotism. And that's, I think, what you were talking about, Sebastian. Is that right?
I'd say it somewhat connects.
Connects.
Not
Okay.
largely.
Anybody else want to have discussion that Jim, you were talking about something before we started?
Yeah, but I don't know. Do you want to just keep on the patriotism thing? I had a local question about the Santa Clarita City Council, but I think
we were talking about power issues. I think that's what you said, that it would be good to talk about power issues in this community.
Well, the question that I had was about whether the council is reconfigured into districts instead of having at-large council members.
Okay.
And that was the question I had.
Well, Peg, let's go ahead, Patty. Were you going to say something?
I'm interested in that, because I recall, I don't think Miranda is correct in what you're describing. He said, Jim,
Right. I don't know. I had said, I think before we started recording, last week, the League of Women Voters had a chat with the mayor, and it was a 90-minute interview with Bill Miranda, the mayor. And one of the questions that I asked was that I had worded the question, if the city is, changes to a district representation rather than at-large representation, how will that change the city? When the question was read, instead of using the word if, the word when was used. And so the question posed to Bill was, when the city moves to districts rather than at-large representation, how will that change the way the city is governed? And Bill responded by saying that the person who asked the question must know something he doesn't, because basically it was his understanding that wasn't going to break into districts. And my recollection was that before the pandemic, the city council was going to hold hearings on it, and that was postponed until after once the pandemic was over, they would start holding the hearings. And I haven't followed the matter since. And I know Al is always on top of city matters, and I just was wondering if he had some additional information about that.
Well, I remember the same thing you do, with one addition. They also said that they were going to wait for the end of COVID and for the new census to arrive, so that they could make a better decision on districts. But I got to tell you one thing about the way the city operates. Whenever there's something that they're not really sure whether they want to do or not, they tend to put it off. And if nobody reminds them, it'll just never happen. So just like the solar panels on Soledad that have been going on for 3 years now, we just have to remind them who they were, and then I think we'll get a discussion.
I trust you'll be one of the reminders.
Absolutely.
Patty, did you want to say something?
Yes. Well, my recollection of that is that the judge postponed the decision about whether the city of Santa Clarita will go to voting districts, because the formation of districts by law requires public input. And because of the COVID situation and not having open live meetings in City Hall where people could go to the microphone and testify about their position on the districts and so forth, that's how they got off. That's how the city was excused from forming districts. It would have happened except for COVID. So I don't think Mayor Miranda is speaking correctly. I think he's speaking from his druthers, what he'd rather happen than what's going to happen. But I do believe that district voting will happen. I think it's going to happen. It's a matter of time.
Oh, look, Lynn's gotten on. Hey, Lynn, you made it.
But also, I watched a city council meeting recently, and I hadn't watched one in quite a while, and I was impressed when I think we find the issue of what bring our commonalities and our humanity is what will bring us together. And that became evident to me when I heard the council members discussing the issue was before the city, an expansion of the hospital. Now, the hospital expansion plan has been on the table since 2008, and this is just another phase, and that the council must approve. The city planning department the planning commission has already made their recommendation, but activists in the community took the opportunity to address the city council on the need for mental health beds for teenagers. And they wanted the city council members to tie the expansion of the hospital to a requirement of mental health beds for teenagers. And when the council members that were discussing it, the ones who they showed their humanity, and to the council members, and my particular politics don't typically agree with our city council members, but two of them spoke about when the hospital identified the need for neonatal intensive care unit. And those two gentlemen, Cameron Smythe and Jason Gibbs, spoke about their own children. And these are young family men with children now, and we haven't had young family men or council members with young children in quite a few years. And they personally needed that service when their children were born. And they have empathy now for the families who are suffering, where their teenagers need mental health care and would have to travel 50 miles or more away. And I was very impressed, but also impressed that that when you recognize the need, your humanity and each other's needs, it's easier to identify with the other. But unfortunately, they don't do enough of that, I don't think. And had those two gentlemen not needed neonatal intensive care for their infant children when they were born, they might, and now these children, are somewhere between now babies and teenagers, may need a mental health bed. And it's just a shame that they can't extrapolate or have more empathy for others, that they have to have their own, it has to hit them before they can identify in a lot of issues.
This sort of ties in to Peg's and Al's idea about sharing our own stories and getting to know each other, on a personal basis.
It matters. It makes
I'm sorry?
a difference. It matters. It makes a difference.
So if we talk tonight about our own stories, would that be something that you might want to do?
Sure.
Yes?
I'm good.
Good. Okay, Peg, would you start?
Okay, I will. I enjoyed listening to the way you described the three types of patriots. And I found myself in my early adulthood in category number 2, which was I'm a good citizen. I care about my country. I was not particularly involved in much of anything other than my voting and checking out who I was voting for. I eventually, though, became patriot number 3, a more active and involved person, and I stumbled to it based upon the fact that I, like any of you who have kids, had taught my children, my husband and I had taught them to believe in, to stand up for what they believe in. Anything that comes their way, regardless of what's popular, they need to stand up for what it is that they truly believe in. And in 1986, I received a note from my then 20-year-old son, and he asked me not to read it until I had gotten on the freeway. I was on my way down to LA with a friend, and fortunately she was driving. And when I opened up this note, in it said, "I have to tell you something that I'm not sure you're going to take well." And it went on to say, "I'm gay." There, I just said it. And he continued on with, "I hope you'll continue to love me despite this. I spent many long and lonely years trying to come to grips with it." And it went on, and it was very personalized. And of course, he ended with, "I love you." And I was thrown for a loop. I had just finished a counseling course. I got my master's in school counseling. Never in my courses was homosexuality discussed, other than one time when we were told, "What are you going to say to a dad who comes in and tells you he has a gay kid?" And then the teacher's response to us, none of us who had one on our own, was, well, you better figure it out because it's going to happen. So I knew I loved my child, but I knew very, very little about homosexuality. It was not something, because it didn't affect me personally, Patty, like what you're talking about. I had never really thought one way or the other about it. My own knowledge, didn't even know anybody who was gay, other than my son, which I found out that day. So he and I talked for about 5 hours when he got home that night from work. I phoned him immediately from a payphone. That's how far back it was, at the top of Lions at the gas station, to tell him I loved him. And then I just emotionally curled up into a fetal position. That's not a literal thing, but that's how I felt, because I didn't know how to handle this. I didn't know what to do about it. So we had a wonderful, wonderful conversation. He and my husband had chatted a few weeks beforehand, and he was worried about my, because of religion, he was worried that I was not going to take this well. So that had absolutely no impact whatsoever, but my lack of knowledge, my ignorance, and this is a word that Valerie had used last week about trying to understand people and being ignorant of where they are coming from. So my ignorance really was hitting me at that time. So my son luckily brought me some brochures from a support group for parents, but I was not ready to look at them for about 3 or 4 weeks. And I finally read them and I said, wow, these people actually talk about this. 1986, AIDS was raging, no Will and Grace, no Modern Family. Rock Hudson was the only visible gay person any of us knew, and he was dying. So it was not a topic that was out there for discussion. So we started to go to the support group down in LA. It was called PFLAG. And at that time, it was Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, because the other sexual orientations and gender expressions had not actually been quite discovered yet. People who experienced them knew, but the world didn't. Science didn't. Science had just taken homosexuality off the rolls of mental illness 11 years before Jeff came out to me. So I had to learn a whole lot, and I kept this a secret from all but my very closest friends, because I was a basket case on the one side and intellectually perfectly fine with it on the other side. So it took a lot of listening to others who were in a like situation, sharing their stories with me, stories, Alan, their life experiences. And eventually I was able to talk about it without crying. It took 9 months. And then and that was when I told my mom, which was another rough experience. She was in New York and I didn't want her to until I could tell her in person. So I made it over a Memorial Day. I took a flight to New York. I brought some books and the brochures that I had, and came to tell her. Sadly, my sister beat me to it because she can't keep it secret, and I shared it with her the same when I told her why I was coming back to New York. My mother was wonderful. In the interim between my sister's telling her and my arriving at, she was 75, I think, at the time. She was in a library trying to research for herself. So that was great. I still get a little emotional about it, so I'm sorry if I.
No, this is lovely. This is a great story. So that led you into it helping to establish PFLAG out here, and then your leadership, all those years that you've done.
Yeah, it was about 2 years before we started PFLAG here. We were going down to LA, and we were very happy with the group and very involved with the LA group. But what happened up here was that there was a lesbian teacher who worked at Fairfax High School, and she formed a safety net for her LGBT, gay and lesbian again, students, because she found that what was happening is when they were being bullied at school and harassed and called names, the administration tended to transfer them out of the school rather than to deal with the bullies who were making their lives hell. So she formulated a group called Project 10, the 10 standing for the 10% of the population that is gay.
Or gay or lesbian, yeah.
And so she was coming up to speak to an extension class with the University of Phoenix. Educators were attending the class. Word got out that she was coming up. She was maligned. Articles that were completely untrue about her were put in every teacher's mailbox at my school. I was working at Hart as a counselor. And the articles were accusing her of locking kids in her classroom and teaching them how to be gay.
Oh.
I read it. It was true. That's what they were saying. So the night that she was to speak, St. Stephen's, which was the school at which the church at which we had our extension class, the apron on Orchard Village Road was filled with 400 protesters.
Wow.
And a goodly portion of them, 2 or 3 busloads, were bussed up from Anaheim by a pastor who was a gay hater and a gay. And then the rest of the group were primarily local churches who were protesting a lesbian speaker telling educators how they can make a safe environment for their gay and lesbian students.
Wow.
So Santa Clarita was not a very welcoming place.
Phew.
So my husband and I attended the rally.
What year was that, Peg?
It was about 1988.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And we attended the rally. Funny, because the teacher who had put all the stuff in the mailboxes at my school was present. She was one of the organizers of it. And she knew, well, she was introduced to Sheldon, and he ended up coming over and speaking to my husband and me. And he said, well, now, what churches, let's see, something to the effect of something about inviting us to worship with some of the churches in town. And we just said, well, we're very happy at Our Lady of Perpetual Help. We go there to Mass every Sunday. So he couldn't get us on not being religious people. So he kind of walked away, and that was that. But the biggest thing that impacted my husband and me was a woman from our PTOs. She was a president of Canyon High's PTO. And she got up and said that her son had been a student in Santa Clarita Valley Schools since kindergarten. He was now a 12th grader, and he had never had a gay kid in his class. So we just looked at each other and said, we need PFLAG up here. And so we started it. It was very scary. The environment was completely hostile. And we didn't publicize it initially, other than, well, we didn't have websites. It was a word of mouth, basically. It got around first by word of mouth. Counselors at the different schools knew about it because I was a counselor and I was able to share that with them, our meetings with them. Let me see. So what would happen would be that the Signal periodically would publish articles that would be homophobic.
That would be what? Homophobic?
Homophobic articles.
Okay.
Yeah, it was not unusual, and today it's still unusual on occasion for commentaries to be in there. So our deal then was, okay, how do we fight this? And so I started inviting reporters to come to our meetings. They were confidential, and we'd check out with our membership if it was okay. And then those who were comfortable enough would allow the reporter to sit in their group, because we broke into breakout sessions. And we got very lovely articles written about PFLAG. So that ended up publicizing the group. And our names were mentioned in it, and that was very scary, but it was necessary. So the second thing that happened, and this was a few years later, as I was a counselor when Jeff first came out to me. So maybe 3 years into my counseling, at the end of every year, the counselors would say, okay, what topics do we want on our agenda for our monthly meetings next year? And so finally, I held up my little PFLAG brochures. I was shaking. I was not publicly out to the district. I was just, some choice people at my school. Yes. So I said, well, how about addressing the needs of this population? And I said, I told them about PFLAG. They said, great, we really could benefit from knowing how it was for these kids when they were in our schools. So my suggestion was that I would get a panel together of kids who had gone to every single school in the Hart District. So I got 8 students, and among the 8, every school was covered. Every junior high, every high school, and Bowman, which was the only other non-traditional school. So very excited, got questionnaires out to the kids to give them prompts about what they could discuss. They could write out these questionnaire things, and then they'd be able to talk about things without having to think when we had our actual meeting. So August rolls around, and the head of special ed district office called me in, director of support services. And I thought, great, she's going to want to hear all about this plan that we have for this panel and tell me what a great thing this is. So I was invited in, and I was told that the superintendent wouldn't allow it to happen. And the superintendent's reasoning was, he said to her, would you like to be responsible if this gets into the signal and the community says we're promoting homosexuality? Those were his words. So that was number 2 as far as letting me know what the climate of our community was. And then I really went gung-ho on my activism. And it was, at that time, it wasn't limited only just to gay issues, but that was certainly my mission. My goal was to allow the world to see our gay and lesbian kids, and now our transgender kids, for the wonderful human beings that they are, and to let the community know that religious or not, God does not make junk, and these kids are not junk. And so that's what I've been doing for 33 years.
Oh, Peg, this is a beautiful story. Any reactions, guys? Raise your, Sebastian, you want to talk?
Oh, I was just giving a heart
A
reaction.
heart, I saw
Oh,
that.
thank you.
But I'm always down to give my story too, if you'd like.
Okay,
just
well,
don't
let's
wanna
see if
talk
there are
about
if there are
PFLAG.
any responses or any reactions to Peg's story.
Peggy's great.
Very
I
moving.
mean, it may be that some people here still do not approve of gay lifestyle or whatever. It's,
I have to take issue with the word lifestyle,
well,
because
true.
the kids, gay individuals
Sexuality. Yeah.
do not have any different lifestyle from any of the rest of
Right.
us. That was
Right.
one of the
Excuse me.
fabulous things.
You're absolutely
I'm sorry. It's just because it's lifestyle indicates a choice, and being gay is not a choice, but lifestyle also indicates how you live your lives. And our gay kids live our lives and their lives no differently from the rest of us.
Sure. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, Al, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is you don't have to approve of someone that is doing something differently than you are. You don't have to go out and try to promote the way other people think, but at the same time, it's not necessary that and probably not a really good idea that you take exception, especially when it doesn't impact you. So I just got to think about being in working in JPL, and I met a gentleman, and I was working with him quite a bit, and I would have never have known that he was gay, except that I happened to go to his workstation, and I saw a picture of him and his significant other, and so then he told me about it, and we got to be good friends, and they had a foster child who ended up unfortunately committing suicide. And I remember going to the funeral and then to his house afterwards. and his whole community, and the local church all came and visited them to help him get this very difficult time. So it was that kind of a segmentation doesn't change the fact that you can be a good person. You can be very empathetic about how other people feel, and take care of your children. I think the biggest thing about, and by the way, he came up here. Remember the clean beaches, clean water thing? He was one of the people that were working on that, and I came up and saw him again here in Santa Clarita when he was working on that. But the whole thing comes down to the fact that that if you just let people be people, and let them believe in whatever religion they want to believe in and having whatever sexual lifestyle they want to live, as long as that it's not being pushed on you, you should be able to accept it without any problem, because it's not your thing to
but there
opposed to.
is a very strong element in this community that says, Patty, you remember when that young boy committed suicide from AV, and we had and Joe Messina was having that big prayer breakfast with Pray the Gay Away guy.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that you and Malcolm and I organized a big protest
Yes.
in front of the Hyatt?
Yes.
Because that whole element is so, there's such an element out here that doesn't
Yes, that's
like
true.
people who are different, right?
That's true. That's and it's not isolated to being gay.
No.
Oh, no, not at all.
It's not isolated that at all.
No.
And eventually, when I talk about it, I'll explain my experience, because they didn't want me out here either.
Right. You spoke last week, and you were the one to start the ball rolling in sharing something that was personal to you and also affected you because of discrimination being taken toward you. I just would like to say one last thing. Some people have told me, hey, get out of my face. And I have to explain that I am outspoken only because so many people, as Carole is mentioning, are so damaged by the verbiage of others in this community that it does lead to suicide, tremendous numbers of suicide in this community. And so unless people are out there explaining, and that's what I do, I'm not saying adopt this and embrace it. I mean, don't hurt my kid, other people. That's it. That's all for me.
Any other reaction? Should we move on? Sebastian said he'd like to share.
I would like to share.
Well, can Sebastian go first?
Certainly.
Sure.
Oh, you would like to share about this Peg's story? Is that what you said, Dave?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I was thinking about the first people that I met, a couple of housemates of mine who were gay. In my late 20s, I guess I met them. And they seemed, I was not very comfortable with people. And they seemed so much larger than I was that it confabulated me. And I've been sitting here
I don't
thinking,
understand what larger than you.
well, happier, connected, more able to deal with other people. And it struck me that people who actively don't like other people, very often it is because they don't like themselves.
Mhm.
And I was never taught as a child to accept or like myself. So I knew I was straight, but I couldn't imagine anybody being interested in me.
Till I came along.
So
I
3
said,
years of AA.
AA did it. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or as I
Well,
used to call it, the practice tee.
Go ahead, Al.
That's another point that I think that was very interesting is being probably one of the more mature people in this group.
The three of us up here.
Yeah, I know.
I'm in there too, guys.
Yeah, okay. But
Chronologically.
for a very long time, you didn't know who was gay because they hid it.
Mhm.
And it's only been more recent in time when people have come out, not only when they say coming out of the closet, but not only that, but in public.
Mhm.
So it's good to know that people can be happy with themselves, Dave, and not hide who they are, even if it's not the majority of who they're with. I think that's really good. I mean, I love Andrew down here. Where is he? There he is. And the guy is a great guy. And so, you know, if in some respects he thinks a little differently than I do, or does things a little differently than I, that's fine, because that doesn't make him any worse of a person, right? Right, Andrew?
No.
Am I gay?
No.
No, you're bald.
Are you coming out?
Shh. Yeah, no, definitely gay. Yeah, no, it's, I will say though, I don't know if anybody else on this call is, and if anyone is, and you want to shout it, by all means. Yes, times have gotten better. And it is thanks to allies and the work of the older LGBT generations and allies like Peggy. But there really is a lot of work that does still have to be done. I will tell you, there is, I mean, I'm not dating now because, you know, pandemic. But when there was still always that thought in my head when I was in a relationship, you know, going out in public, holding the hand in Santa Clarita, thinking, am I about to get beat the crap out of? Like that, those thoughts still cross my mind. It's still scary. Like, I'm not in West Hollywood, that like, or in San Francisco. That's like the gay town, you know, but going out in public is still very creepy sometimes. Like, if you're yourself, different when you're with friends, it always is. But we have a lot of work to do, and it's a weird little feeling. I mean, it's different like when I was at PFLAG too, because you're with your family.
Well, it's not just gays, it's
No.
Blacks and Hispanics, and you know, it's
atheists.
Atheists. Oh yeah, atheists.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Like-
anybody who's different. My tribe is the only tribe, and you have to go away because we don't like you.
Publicly different.
Can we hear from Sebastian, who's been really
Yeah, I'd
patient?
love to hear Sebastian,
Thank you.
please.
Just I love all the conversations that's happening here about inclusivity and acceptance of LGBTQ plus rights, and just, I guess, relating that, I just want to just bring up my story and kind of connect that kind of I don't want to say being an outcast, but being someone from a certain historically marginalized background or from a diverse population, also having those kind of experiences of feeling underrepresented in society at a young age and in the community. And so I feel like that's some kind of relating factor, and a relating factor to a lot of people in general, kind of trying to give back or experiencing some of that alienation themselves, and then trying to birth something from that. I just want to just add in general, we were talking stories and just how I had a variety of influences and inspirations to try to make the community a better place for young people, make it a better place for students, and have these inspirations from my past, whether it was family members that were veterans or family members that marched in the United Farm Workers Movement and all this kind of various avenues to create change. And that kind of inspired me from a young age. And so I was a young person throughout Santa Cruz and throughout high school that was just trying to create change in every avenue I could and trying to find what was best for me. And it slowly culminated through the years in me now, being an elected person, which is very exciting honor. And that was shaped from that initial desire of being a young person that felt underrepresented and pouring my heart and soul into trying to build something for other young people that felt the same way and needing some kind of inspiration like that. So just applying my story and briefly explaining some of the things that I've done in Santa Cruz, and I guess how that there's connectivity to all of us finding our way or passion through these personal connections. So just wanted to briefly just mention that.
Thank you, Sebastian. But I think we all have fire in our belly. I think that's the reason that we do things. That Peg's fire was the injustice and the we like to help others. I think that the screen here are people who have a sense of wanting to, we're all in this together, kind of WAITT, we're all in this together kind of feeling, and we manifest it through a variety of ways. And yours, how old were you when you got the fire belly, Sebastian?
Like 15.
And what was the specific thing that happened?
I mean, I was also a product of this American political climate. So I grew up in the countries, all of that, and coming out to try to make a difference. But I did have personal connections, right? Like I did feel as someone, I do have privileges. I grew up, this is a nice community to grow up in. I have my citizenship, but in a lot of the climate of what was going on, I felt like there was a lot of just kind of personal connections to what it was like growing up being Latino or just being from an immigrant background. And I felt like there was xenophobic movements that were growing in the country. And I felt like a firm stance to stand against that with all the platforms that I could have. And on top of that, I also had family in Puerto Rico too that experienced like some of that personally when that whole Hurricane Maria like disaster happened, and we saw the failure.
Did they get some paper towels?
Exactly right. So a young man like me was seeing that happen and understanding like, oh my God, like all these political injustices are happening to my people and yada yada. And so, and on top of this as well, I also was a alumni of Saugus High School, and a lot of things that happened from that kind of gave me some kind of passion to, like how can I give back to students in this community? And that kind of all led me to where I am today right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sebastian, when you were younger, did you ever encounter any kind of discrimination yourself?
Yeah, definitely. And people in my family too, or at least like my brother is like open about it. Like we both are pretty vocal as people who grew up in Santa Cruz, and we were here back, in 2000. So we kind of have experienced the community as it's changed, and I've seen how much it's progressed, and it's been like really beautiful thing to see. But there has been moments of that, and I guess a good semblance through it all though is the fact that there are a lot of people of color and more that are coming into our community, and there's now young people of color that are organizing, and I do work with them too to kind of create that kind of inclusive environment, and it's slowly happening each day by the moment, and so we're getting there. But I do try to be open about my experiences and that kind of struggle, what it was like to be a young person of color in today's climate in America.
Well, I do think that young people are so much more aware of the injustices and absolutely terrified about the environmental potential environmental collapse, and this generation kids seem to be much more savvy about needing to be active, you know, about what's going on in the world. I think that's my impression.
Yeah, I think
Any other ideas?
really
Yes,
right.
Jim. Go ahead, Jim.
I think you're right about the millennial generation. I think a lot of them are written off as snowflakes. I've worked professionally, you know, my staff, I was a partner with a Big Four accounting firm, and we had lots of young people, and people dismiss the millennials as being snowflakes and so forth, but they grew up in a little different culture. When I grew up, you know, there was a lot of free time. You know, after school, we went out and played ball in the street or did whatever, but we organized all of our own activities. I think the millennial kids, they had everything organized for them. And what I found with the younger folks later on in my career who worked for me, they worked harder than my generation ever did, but they needed more direction. They said, "Tell me what to do and I'll kill myself doing it." Whereas in my generation, we killed ourselves, sort of, not quite to the same extent, but we spent more time trying to figure out solutions. And once I spent time with the younger folks, sort of mentoring them and explaining to them that, you know, that where you're really going to make a difference is by thinking outside the box and not seeking direction, but trying to innovate. Once you can see the light bulb go on, and, you know, these I call them kids because I'm an old guy. You know, you could just see them, you know, they really, that's what they needed. And that's the generation that's, well, as I'm fond of saying, that's a generation that's going to pick out my elder care facility that I'm going to live in. So I want to make sure they know how to make the right choice. And they will. We've left them with a divided society with a lot of financial problems. We live in an era that's got unbelievable amounts of change happening at record paces, and they will figure out how to deal with it. I'm pretty confident. So
voting. They need to vote at the very least, right?
I wanted to just close back on one thing we had talked earlier about, and by the way, I really enjoyed this discussion, you know, about the differences and so forth with people, you know, whether they're gay or trans, whatever they are, they're human beings. They may be wired a little differently than we are, but they are productive members of society, and they deserve all the respect and support that we can give them. But I wanted to sort of circle back, because we talked about the concept of patriotism. Mm-hmm. And when I was in high school, I was in a Masonic youth organization called DMLA, and they had the 7 cardinal virtues of a DMLA. And the 7th cardinal virtue was the one of patriotism. And they talked about the heroism of war and the patriotism of peace. And they went through, in most of the ritual that you talked about, you delivered, talked about the patriotism of peace, being a good citizen, doing the things that made your community and your country a better place to be. And I think we've sort of gotten away from that. And we tend to confuse the concepts of patriotism and nationalism and think they're the same, because, you know, you wave a flag, you're patriotic when maybe you're really more nationalistic. And we have to realize, I mean, America is a great place, and the flag represents all the greatness of America. We've had our problems and so forth, but we can't just exclude the rest of the world. You know, we're a global economy. We're more and more interconnected, and we have to understand that we have to work collaboratively, not selfishly.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments? Well, go ahead. Somebody said something.
I was just because I think we're about to wrap up, right?
It's going to be, yeah. I was going to say we've been on for about 45
I was
about
just gonna-
45, 50 minutes now.
I was gonna say by the next discussion, I hope because Lynn can join us, we're going to discuss climate change.
Oh, yes, that's
Okay.
really, it's so important. And we have to have you here, Lynn, when we do that.
Sebastian and I, that is going to be our generation's literal.
Well, you guys are not millennials. You are Gen Zs. Is that what you are?
I am actually the last generation of millennial.
You are
Gen
the
Z.
end of millennials. You're a Gen Z. Right?
I'm a Zoomer.
Gen Z.
So are we all now.
Yeah, welcome to the club.
I'm a
Well,
Gen
some of us
Z.
way better than others, right?
I'm a
Yeah.
Zoomer.
Well, I'm so glad we all finally figured out how to get on, and we got a nice group. I heard while we were talking, I heard from a couple of people, and they either couldn't get on, and Steve just got home, so hopefully.
Well, I hope
we'll be
Dave will not, will learn how to unclick whatever he clicked or didn't click to make it.
Well, how did you get on, Lynn? How did you
You know
get
what?
on?
Well, I went through my desk and found my password finally. I still had to have a password. I
Oh,
finally found it, but
Yeah.
I mean, I have a pretty messy desk, so it took a while.
You know,
But and then I tried to go on change my browser, go with Chrome, but that didn't really work. I needed to find my
Okay, well, let's work on the technical aspects. We'll get better.
yeah. I mean,
guys.
having to have a passcode and sign in is the pits.
A special thanks to a very special thanks to Al for editing this and helping us so much, and Dave, of course, my darling Dave, getting it up on YouTube, and you all for participating. I learned so much tonight, and I'm so grateful that you had this idea. You and Al, Peg and Al had this idea. Is this what you had in mind, Al? Yeah. Okay. Well,
Wait,
yes,
one
go
more
ahead,
thing.
Peg.
I just want to go on back to what we originally were talking about, which was redistricting.
Oh,
This-
yes.
Just for a
Okay.
quickie, this morning on SCV TV, the Chamber of Commerce put up a webinar all about it with our district's representative, our area's representative, who's going to be in charge of the redistricting.
Oh,
You mean
Um,
the assembly and the state senate
Yes,
district
yes.
and the congressional district,
And,
not
and
the
Okay.
city redistricting.
not the city, but the. if you
oh,
want- if you want
redistricting.
input-
Oh, you mean the nonpartisan
We're talking,
redistricting?
yeah, we're talking about
state-
based on the new
statewide
census.
redistricting group.
Right,
Okay.
based on the new census, and if you want, they want citizen input on everything.
Yes, yes.
So
I
this is-
helped
if you can-
get that organized 10 years ago.
Right,
And,
so if you can find this webinar today, it'll give you a lot of really good information about the
Okay.
redistricting.
We really are way ahead of a lot of states with the redistricting. I think it was not perfect, but I do think it took it out of the hands of the politicians and to a great degree. And I'm hoping that we can continue. So,
We're gonna
okay, anything else? Any other parting comments?
Yeah,
Yes,
just
Sebastian.
just a comment. Everybody should go. It's either on Netflix or Amazon Prime. I think it's Netflix. Everybody should go see My Octopus Teacher.
Oh, it
God.
was beautiful. It is, I think it's Netflix.
Because it teaches you how to deal with the other when the other is really, really other. And the basic lesson, there are a bunch of lessons in there, but the basic lesson is listen.
Yes.
Just
Yeah,
listen.
that's an Academy Award
Yeah.
as best documentary. Sebastian, what were you going to say, dear?
I was just gonna just really briefly add on to what James was saying and just like connecting to everything and like to express the level of energy that my generation and Gen Z and younger folks have in trying to fix the country's problems and give back to people, and just this idea when we talk about patriotism or citizenship, I think that there are while a lot of, I think, changes are happening and things are being redefined, I think
Just a
there's
minute.
something to be said that people are finding their own avenues to convey patriotism or convey citizenship in unconventional means. And I think that the country and our generation is kind of redefining what it means to be active, what it means to be a citizen, what it even means to be an American. And I just feel like something about that is all coming together in this discussion when we're talking about these ideals of our country and our community. And
there is a scholar, Yale professor scholar, who talks about every 40 to 50, 60 years, there is what's called a paradigm shift. I know that when Reagan came in, that was a shift from FDR. And when FDR came in, 1930s, that was a paradigm shift from the Gilded Age, from the robber baron age. And when you go back all the way back to the founding of our country, there seems to be a shift in every 40, 50 years. You just count back and see the new idea comes in. Actually, it's not new. It's an old idea that gets refound, and then that wears out, and then we get another new idea. So I think your generation is the paradigm shift. I think that that's my feeling, is that we have just a different feel about civic responsibility and engagement and involvement, I think. Anyway, thank you all very much, and see you next month, right?
Thank you, Carole.
Bye-bye.
Good
Bye
night.
now.
take care, everyone.
Night.
Carole, is it always going to be the fourth Monday?
Fourth Monday, if that's okay.
Okay.
Good. Good night.
Trails
Bye-bye.
to you until
Good night,
we
guys.
meet.